Okay, so it's been quite a week in Ukraine, and it's been mostly international events this week that have been driving the headlines. My name is Gerdes. I'm just a professor trying to help you understand what's going on in Ukraine. I'm going to go over the major headlines that I saw that I dealt with, and from there, we'll just kind of unpack what's happened over the course of the week. We'll start with Sunday, October 1st. It is now today, Monday, October 9th. So we'll go Sunday to Sunday. So Russia and Ukraine traded missile strikes. There's nothing new there. The Slovak democracy, the SMER SD party, won in Slovakia. And according to the article here in RT, their frame of this, quote, Slovakia and the people of Slovakia have bigger problems than Ukraine, the new prime minister, or would-be prime minister, said at a press conference following the announcement of the election results. The SMER SD won around 23% of the vote, with its closest competitor, Progressive Slovakia, receiving some 18%. This was a really bad sign. This happened in the previous week, but it was a really bad sign because they're kind of turning their backs on Ukraine. And Slovakia and Hungary could be forming this bloc, and God forbid if Poland goes this direction, we could have a pretty significant problem with unity within Europe. Okay, Ukraine is trying to protect the energy grid before the winter. We know what happened last year, and they're working to create a workable system so it can't be repeated this year. The U.S. government averts government shutdown, but removed the new Ukraine support temporarily. They had a continuing resolution to keep the government going. This was not about Ukraine as such. It was more or less Republicans and Democrats not getting along, as they just don't tend to get along. And there's nothing really new about that. That's just how they roll. But at the same time, Ukraine aid was stripped in the process because it was a continuing resolution, not a new bill. Okay, Biden vows to stand by Ukraine despite the budget fiasco, and good on him for doing that. Lindsey Graham says that Ukraine aid will not be separated from border funding. Border funding is a big thing for Republicans, and Lindsey Graham's a Republican, and he's saying it's going to be tied to Ukraine funding, and we're not going to do one without doing the other, and good on Lindsey Graham. Okay, Monday, 2nd of October, the EU, after the U.S. had this, they were about to have $6 billion going to Ukraine in the bill that never got passed because of the continuing resolution. The EU stepped up, and I did a video about this last week. EU in a historic show of support after a U.S. budget deal snub. Not sure I would call it a snub, but that's just how the politics worked. But the EU, the secretaries of the Treasury, finance ministers equivalent, all got together, went to Kyiv the next day, and they worked out a $5.25 billion package for Ukraine. So good on them. Ukrainian lawmakers and Elon Musk are trading barbs on social media. It was pretty childish. Elon Musk put together just a meme that was kind of rude to Zelensky, and they're going back and forth about it. And I don't know exactly what happened to Elon Musk. He was very helpful in the early days of the conflict, and now he's kind of looks like he's siding with the Russians for some reason I can't quite detect. Interfax says that Italy is to take patronage of restoration of Odessa after the war. That's a good sign. They're thinking toward the future. Politico says that there's a leaked U.S. strategy that sees corruption as the real threat, and it is a real threat. Corruption in Ukraine gives opponents of Ukraine this argument that we shouldn't be supporting it and can weaken the coalition. So Ukraine's working on it, the U.S. is concerned about it, and they're trying to fix the problems. Again, it's part of the Soviet hangover. The Soviet Union was fairly corrupt, and Russia is even more corrupt than Ukraine, statistically. A Ukrainian soldier called Russian tech support when a Russian tank wouldn't start, and he recorded himself and talking to tech support on, like, he video recorded himself while he was talking to tech support, and then told them, like, hey, by the way, I'm Ukrainian. And the only thing wrong with this, and it was great propaganda value, the only thing wrong with this is he should never have led on to this and just kept that in their pocket so that they could call tech support and whenever they needed to and get help from Russia on this. That would have been awesome. Okay, signed Tuesday, October 3rd. At Signs of the Times, memorial markers to victims of Stalin are disappearing in Russia. Now, this is actually happening where there were memorials to people who were victimized by Stalin's regime being taken down. I think there were like 11 in the last month or two, something along those lines, according to the article. Now, this is a quote from the article because I've made the case, and I've said it again and again, Russia is like re-Sovietizing or like becoming more like it once was in that sense. Quote, civil society activists report that 110 monuments to Stalin, including 22 full-scale statues, have been erected in Russia. 95 of them, listen to this, 95 of them since Putin came to power in 1999. There are more statues to Stalin now, like 5-fold increase in statues to Stalin since Putin came to power. Like, think about that. Wrap your mind around that. Zelensky visits the frontline troops in the east as Russia targets civilians in the south. Nothing new there. Zelensky has just an amazing capacity for encouraging and motivating his troops, and he's not afraid to go to the front lines. Russia, on the other hand, targets civilians and then claims that it's only military. No, it's not only military. It's really not. Okay, Wednesday, October 4th, Ukraine veterans say that Ukraine's facing a long war. They really are. January 1st this year, I was saying I don't think it'll be over by January 1st next year, and I hope that I'm wrong, but I think it's going to keep going. How the Canadian Parliament's Nazi scandal fueled a Russian disinformation campaign. This was in Euronews, and it really did. I mean, it was an unforced error, and the Russians have made a lot of hay of this, and repeaters on social media put things out on social media that are saying, see, this guy was a Nazi, and see, it's all unchecked, unverified repeaters. And I actually did a video about this related to this. Somebody else challenged me and said, oh, so here's this flag that's a Nazi symbol and Zelensky signing it. Well, it turns out that same symbol is a symbol of Lviv and a symbol of other things, this lion symbol, and it was used by the Nazis, but it's not just that. They gave Zelensky grief because he had an Iron Cross on his shirt when he came and spoke when by video link, he spoke to the American Congress. Well, the Brits use that same Iron Cross too. It's called the Victoria Cross. So you can't just say that, see this symbol, that's proof positive. No, it's not. Okay, let's continue. Russian authorities announced that they may block all VPN in March 2024. Why would you want to block all outside information coming into your country? That's question number one. If you do, will it be for good or bad purposes? That's question number two. Why March 2024? Do you not have the technical capability? That's question number three. Or is there some political motivation behind it? That's question number four. So you need to think through why that might be happening if it does. Technically, they're not supposed to have VPN capability, but they do. And a lot of, especially younger people, have VPNs in Russia. Polish government says assistance to Ukrainian refugees may be gradually canceled in 2024. I think this was already in the cards anyway. Poland has really done an amazing amount for refugees, but it's been very taxing on them. What does Speaker McCarthy's ousting mean for U.S. aid to Ukraine? Nothing good is going to come of this. Speaker McCarthy was the most pro-Ukrainian that you're likely going to get. I think if you're looking at it, maybe Scalise will do about as well, but I'm not sure about that. All the other candidates are going to be worse from those that I'm aware of right now. That could change, but it was terrible. All Democrats and 8 Republicans voted for his ouster, not over Ukraine, over other Republican versus Democrat stuff. But if you cared about Ukraine, you should never have voted to remove Speaker McCarthy. That was just, that's terrible. Okay, Biden is worried that the turmoil in Washington could disrupt Ukraine aid, and he should be worried about that because that is a legitimate possibility. On the same day, Ukraine briefly landed on Crimea from the sea, and the way RT framed it was that Ukrainians suffered losses, but I think they captured one person or something like that. I could have my facts wrong. I'm not very clear about that. But just that they were able to land a flag, plant a flag on Ukrainian soil was great propaganda value because they're saying we're still coming. We haven't forgot about you. Okay. RT removes Zelensky shopping spree article. I did a whole video about this, and then shortly after I did the video, they removed, no, it's not because of me, but they removed the article about Zelensky's shopping spree at Cartier, and Cartier employee was saying, and they made this whole social media thing up about it. I'm telling you, there's something really odd about that particular campaign, and like please go back and watch that video if you haven't. They said that she spent $1 million while Zelensky was begging for money in New York. Well, the receipt that they say that they had was a day after she left New York. She was already in Canada, and yeah, there's a lot to it that was all wrong, and they're not even good at the propaganda that they put out. Like, okay, anyway, U.S. supplies Ukraine with 1 million rounds of ammunition seized from Iran. Quote, the transfer of the ordnance followed a civil forfeiture case pursued by the Justice Department to gain ownership on the grounds that the bullets were seized as they were being smuggled to Yemeni forces in violation of a UN arms embargo. Sounds like a lot, but 1 million bullets will go very quickly, so it's not all that much. Thursday, October 5th, the U.S. public support for arming Ukraine has declined, but that can amp back up, and it'll amp back up when you see tangible evidence of their winning, or when the Kerch Bridge gets blown up, or something along those lines. Zelensky was speaking to Grenada Summit, that's in Spain, to Grenada in Spain. He said the main task is to preserve unity in Europe, and I think he's spot on. That is the main task. The Spanish Prime Minister said we're ready to support Ukraine until the end of the war, and so that's good to know. Russians attacked a civilian facility in Kharkiv. Initially, 48 were dead. By the end of the day, they would say 51 dead. After that, they would say 52 are dead. Quote, Zelensky described it on Telegram as a, quote, demonstrably brutal Russian crime, a rocket attack on an ordinary grocery store, a completely deliberate act of terrorism. My condolences to all those who lost loved ones, unquote. So this was a village of 330 people. 52 of them are dead, many more injured, and they were at a funeral, actually a wake for somebody who had died, and a rocket hit that place. No military target at all, just a tiny village in the middle of nowhere. Okay, Pravda. Putin claimed that at Valdai summit that Russia did not start the war, but he's trying to end it. So according to RT, Putin says Russia is not looking for more territory. Quote, this is not a territorial conflict and is not even the establishment of a regional geopolitical balance, the president said. This question is much broader and much more fundamental. We are talking about the principles of a new world order. And then he goes on to say this. The Russian leader insisted that a lasting peace can only be established, quote, when everyone feels safe and knows that their opinion is respected. Now, he's talking about himself and Russia, but what about the Ukrainians? I'm pretty sure they don't feel safe and respected. Another story in Pravda, Russian Navy bases to appear in Azbizga, Abkzhzia. It's part of Georgia, or a breakaway region from Georgia, or region that Russia has kind of pulled away from Georgia. And that's because Sevastopol is no longer really tenable, and so now they're finding alternatives, which is absolutely amazing. Okay, there was another article, and I did a video about this before I saw this article, about how there's a new form of warfare, how Russia reclaimed the Black Sea. And they really have. If you think about the counteroffensive in terms of how much of the Black Sea the Ukrainians have pushed Russia out of, it's really amazing. Now, the UK is warning that Russia is laying sea mines in the Black Sea, and that's because they want to stop grain from getting out, but they don't want to fire rockets. They want to let a sea mine do the damage and then blame Ukraine for the mine, because Ukraine has mined the sea as well. And so now they want to blame the explosion that would happen on the Ukrainians having mined it. There was a prankster who tricked school administrators into having school children send happy birthday cards to Putin with Bandera's face on it, which is absolutely fascinating. One, that the school administrators would fall for that, and that they're going to do it so blindly that even with Bandera's face on it, saying it's a younger Putin, that they can't look at young Putin, Bandera, and go, this doesn't look right. But this is the blind obedience that you're getting. Putin suggested onboard grenade may have caused Prigozhin's death in the plane crash. That may have been, we just don't know. Financial Times says that Russia scrambles to cover all the ballooning costs of the war, and they are ballooning, and they're out of control, and it's way beyond. It blew the budget for the year, certainly, and there's no likelihood that it's going to get any better anytime soon. Okay, Zelensky says that we're working to ensure not a single dollar or euro ends up in the pockets of those for whom they're not intended. So they are working very hard on trying to curb corruption. Putin, in that same in the same conference at, where was he speaking? Valdai, the Valdai summit, he said that Ukraine has lost 90,000 men since June. Now that's improbable. Here's the quote from the article in RT. Since June 4th alone, Ukrainian units have already lost over 90,000 people, Putin told a plenary session at the Valdai Discussion Club in Sochi. Okay, I did a whole video about this because it's important. So I think what's happening is that they're getting pressure from above, and then at the very lowest level, they're saying, well, X number have been killed, and then it goes up and it expands, and it goes up a level and it expands some more, and it goes up and it expands some more. By the time it gets to Putin, it's 90,000 because every little unit commander is adding to that. I don't know for sure, but I think that's probably what's happening, that he's getting not exactly unfiltered truth. He's getting something that has been twisted and expanded over time. Okay, Friday, 6 October, Ukraine seizes 450 million in assets from 3 Russian oligarchs. Pretty good. Now, they did it legally, and they're taking it from Russian oligarchs, and it's not nothing, 450 million. Ukraine aid, where's the money coming from? This was a great article that had a number of charts. And so you see that humanitarian relief, Poland is taking it in a chin for refugees. I mean, they're spending a lot. You look at how much the U.S. is spending, it doesn't look like much as a percentage of GDP, and nor should it be, because this is a European conflict where we need to be part of it, but Europe should be shouldering much of the responsibility as much as we should be playing our part. But so, and percentage wise, it doesn't look like all that much. But when you look at military supplies, 47% is the United States. 47% of military funding and backing and that kind of thing. That's pretty significant. Okay. Another article here, Kremlin dismisses the claim that Russia targets civilians after Hrozha strike killed 52 people. And Peskov says, quote, reiterate, the Russian military does not strike civilian targets, Peskov told journalists during a press briefing on Friday. Strikes are carried out on military infrastructure, places where military personnel and representatives of the military leadership are gathered. He's full of nonsense. That's just absolutely not it. Okay, Saturday, 7 October, everything changed in a significant way, and we're not exactly sure how or why. Hamas attacked Israel, and I'm not going to relitigate what happened there, and if you want to defend the Palestinians as opposed to Israel, just don't watch my videos on this, because it's clear that Hamas is the aggressor, and Israel has been the recipient of this aggression of thousands of rockets targeting civilians, rapes, kidnappings, all kinds of bad things that there's really no way to justify. So I'm not going to say, I'm going to be non-political or non-partisan. I'm just not going to do that. Hamas is a bad actor. Now, what's interesting is Hamas is in the Gaza Strip. If you look in the West Bank, the PLO, who has been a bad actor for a long time, worked out a political deal where they have mutual co-governance with Israel in that region, and they're working it out. But Hamas is not doing that, and Hamas is also backed by Iran, and so it's going to be a pretty significant problem. And Israel has an eye for an eye policy, so it's not going to go well for Hamas. Ukrainian parliament condemns the Hamas missile attacks on Israel. Zelensky says Israel's right to defense is beyond doubt. Immediate, full-throated support for Israel that Israel never really gave Ukraine. I mean, they kind of did, and they were being quiet about it, but they not this clear. Russia will revoke ratification of a nuclear test ban treaty. Now, that's not as bad as it sounds. So here, a quote from the article will help you understand. The aim is to be on equal footing with the U.S., who signed the treaty but didn't ratify it. Revocation doesn't mean the intention to resume nuclear tests. So it's not as terrible as it sounds. And the way we signed it, our president signed it, but then this was in 2000, so I guess it was Bush, I guess. President signs it, or maybe it was Clinton at the very end of his time. I don't know. But it was signed, but the Senate never ratified it. So they're saying we're pulling out of this treaty that we were going to bind ourselves to. No problem. Belgorod attacked, according to the governor, and it wasn't apparently that big of an attack, some mortar fire or something along those lines. Enemy brings 2 missile carriers into the Black Sea and Mediterranean seas, 1 ship in the Sea of Azov, 3 ships in the Mediterranean. Now, why is Russia so worried that they have to park their Russian ships in the Mediterranean and Sea of Azov in order to keep it away from where Ukraine can strike it? They're worried. It's really interesting to see. Another article, Kyiv says 200 new firms developing combat drones. And this is a rehash of another article I saw this way, but their military technology is going to be spectacular within a few years. Sunday, 8 October, this is yesterday, a dozen people, including a baby, were injured in a Russian attack in Kherson. Of course, they only strike military targets, so that baby was apparently a colonel in the Ukrainian armed forces. And come on, really? I mean, like, let's think through this. If a baby is struck and injured, or they're hitting a apartment complex, or those kind of things, I mean, but they lie, and then they lie, and then they lie. Speaking of lies, Russian biolab lie may be a cover for Russia's own crimes. Now, I'm not sure exactly where the line goes or what Russia might have been doing, but they have a history of saying, see what Ukraine's doing or see what the United States is doing. See what they're doing. That's what Russia was doing. It's really uncanny. The more you read Russian state media, the more you go, wow, that's probably telling of what they're doing. 16 civilians are wounded in 2 attacks in Kherson. Again, same kind of thing. The British say that the Russian invasion is forcing Russia to partner with previously undesirable nations. Quote, the British Defense Ministry said on Monday that its daily intelligence report on Russia's invasion of Ukraine, that the invasion has resulted in international isolation, forcing Russia to redirect its foreign policy efforts and form alliances with previously less desirable partnerships for diplomatic, economic, and military support. So who are they buddies with? Well, Belarus, and they've kind of been there, but then Iran and North Korea are like your big partners. Maybe that's telling. Okay, Russia quadruples spending on military propaganda to voice Russian patriotism and identity on occupied Ukraine, right? So they're trying to convert Ukrainians genocidally, I would add, convert Ukrainians into Russians who turn against Ukraine. Israel's at war. It's day 2 yesterday of Israel at war, and the Israel-Palestine conflict is endangering the oil market. And I gave a big update on that yesterday. I may do another one today. It's important for us to understand what's going on there. And yeah, over 100 Ukrainian citizens asked the Ukrainian embassy in Israel for help. Biden was promising to restore U.S. leadership, but that's tested by this fresh outbreak of war abroad. It's interesting to see how this is going to play into whether it's helping Ukraine or hurting Ukraine. Trump argued that Hamas attack on Israel would not have occurred if he was president. This is his quote in all caps on Truth Social. The horrible attack on Israel, much like the attack on Ukraine, would never have happened if I were president. Zero chance, unquote. Okay. Now, it's interesting that he tied that to much like the attack on Ukraine. And I know that liberals think that Trump would have just rolled over and given Ukraine to Putin. There's thinking on the conservative side of the spectrum, not just Trump conservatives, but conservative, like my kind of conservatives, that Trump's ego would not have allowed him to let Putin go and do that. And just think about that and see what you think about it. We'll never know. It's counterfactual. We'll never be able to go back in history and see, but it's an interesting thought. Okay, Poland's president says Hamas attack on Israel is taking the world's attention from Ukraine, and quote, there is no doubt that it benefits Russia and Russian aggression against Ukraine because it's taking the world's attention away from it, the Polish president said. Now, I don't know. That's my first thought was, yes, this is going to be bad for Ukraine because it's taking our attention away from here and over there. But it's also woken up the hawks in the conservative Republican Party. I don't mean the populist wing with Trump's, but the conservatives are really now like, no, this will not stand. And I'm wondering how many of the Trumpian wing or those that are over there are going to, support Israel and be like, what's going on in Ukraine's kind of parallel. We'll see in time. I can't tell right now. My crystal ball is too murky. But I think there is hope that could actually work in Ukraine's favor. We'll see. All right. That's the headlines for this past week. Thank you for your time and your attention and the likes and the subscribes and the shares. And thank you for the coffees. And thank you more than anything else for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.